It was the pill that revolutionized the way we live with pain.
I'm as dependent on OxyContin as I am on my glasses to see.
So out here.
It was a revolution driven by a marketing campaign that targeted our doctors.
People who are hurting are desperate because of the lack of anything else to offer them.
We now spend more than $10 billion a year on treatment with narcotic pain pills.
I went from spending probably 4 of 7 days in bed to being a mom again.
And we're spending hundreds of millions more on the addictions that the pain pills cause.
I think a huge cat has been let out of the bag, and I don't think it's going to be put back in.
Good evening, I'm Lyndon McIntyre. It's our hidden epidemic, pain. We're told that maybe 6 million Canadians suffer from it, more than 50 million Americans all the time. It costs us billions in lost productivity, all the pills we take to deaden it, and now the incalculable costs of a drug addiction epidemic. Tonight, the story of a marketing campaign that helped transform the way we think of pain, and the miraculous pain pill that turned out to be a medical time bomb. Once a fact of life, pain has become another problem to be solved by pills. Simple pills for simple ailments. But for heavy-duty pain, a heavy-duty drug derived from opium, one the doctors call an opioid. OxyContin is the most dramatically successful of the so-called opioids. The company that developed it is Purdue Pharma, Inc. By ingenious marketing, Purdue companies in Canada and the US succeeded in turning this one pain pill into a multi-billion-dollar business.
At that time, there were no pain clinics around, pain specialist clinics like we have now. Come on, you get one at a time.
In 1997, Tammy Dagnall had never heard of OxyContin. It was only introduced in 1996. She was an insurance broker, a happily married mom living near Hamilton, Ontario. She had chronic back pain. She'd been on a narcotic pill called Percocet. A doctor suggested something new, a narcotic that released its payload slowly. It was a safe narcotic. There was little chance she'd get addicted to it.
And he says, we have a new drug that's on the market called OxyContin. It's not as addicting as Percocet because of the slow release. So when you're in pain, it'll alleviate that pain. But it's not as addicting as Percocet.
Vancouver, 1997. Purdue showcased its new drug here at a conference on chronic pain. In Canada and the US, the drug manufacturers were recruiting health professionals, many of them doctors who were paid to spread the good news about OxyContin to other doctors.
And now I just have a little pointed toothpick, and I'm just going to prick you, and you tell me what it feels like. So out here.
Okay, that's not too bad. Okay, there it feels.
What do you feel?
Thicker.
Thicker?
Dr. Roman Jovi would become one of their most successful advocates, filling a vacuum, as he sees it, in the lives of people suffering with chronic pain.
When you look back 15 years ago, nobody was talking about pain. Certainly the universities failed in their obligation to educate health professionals appropriately. Nobody was talking about pain. And so companies like Purdue stepped in and at least were raising awareness. Were their motives totally altruistic? Probably not.
They had a simple message. OxyContin was a safe narcotic. They would make that claim a mantra in ads like this in the Journal of the Canadian Medical Association, in lectures, workshops, and seminars. This assurance, the one to start and stay with, was convincing. OxyContin could become a friend for life, a vital ally in a war on pain.
How are you doing?
Good, thanks.
Have a seat. All right, it's been 8 weeks or so, right?
Yes.
About 8 weeks?
8 weeks.
For Dr. Jovi, it was the beginning of a new age in pain treatment, a new frontier in which he'd become a pioneer.
Okay, so I'll just leave things as they were. I'll refill things. And
How far is the perception that that was driven by pharmaceutical industry?
I would disagree with that. I don't think that's pharmaceutically driven. I think that that's an awareness issue.
Well,
that people are aware that pain can be treated and it should be treated.
Dr. Jovi readily admits that he's been paid to speak by many drug companies over the years, but Purdue and its new pain medication had special significance for him.
We estimate, based on surveys the Canadian Pain Society has done, there are probably about 6 million Canadians suffering from moderate to severe pain daily or most days of the week. Well, you say, okay, how's that compare to other things? That's a lot. That's probably comparable to those with heart disease and cancer, and perhaps exceeding those.
In 2002, Dr. Jovi edited this handbook. It would become the Bible for doctors treating patients for their pain. It became part of the curriculum of a major med school. It was paid for by Purdue Pharma, the manufacturers of OxyContin. Purdue retained the copyright. The manual has 17 chapters on pain treatment, including 8 by Dr. Jovi. 2 on acute pain and its treatment were contributed by the CBC's medical commentator, Dr. Brian Goldman. Dr. Goldman has also on occasion been paid by Purdue for talks on opioids and pain. He says he's recently modified his views, especially on OxyContin. But to skeptics, Dr. Jovi's manual was little more than advertising for the drug.
So I'm going to give you a month prescription.
Dr. Philip Berger, a pain specialist at St. Michael's Hospital in Toronto.
How aggressive were they in the marketing of the...
You can't get much better than getting in the classroom of medical students. Can't do much better. You know, they can hide under the moral cover of objective teaching. When in fact, the only motive any of these drug companies has, I'm not saying it's bad, is to make money. And you can only make money by selling more drugs.
Dr. Henry Chapesky of London, Ontario was fairly typical.
Blood pressure's perfect, 122 on 80.
A few hours of teaching about pain in med school, very little know-how about treatment. Dr. Jovi's handbook was a godsend.
Yes, it was a good thing, and we understood from the information received from the pharmaceutical representatives that it was, due to the nature of it being a slow-release medication, that it was less addictive, it was less chance of it being abused, and less chance of withdrawal reactions if you stop.
So you started to prescribe it?
Sure did.
I'll just change her in the chair.
Yep.
People like Kim Westlake, suffering from chronic pain, suddenly had hope. Thanks to Purdue and true believers like her doctor. By 2011, Canada would rank second in the world for opioid prescriptions and second in the world for deaths from overdoses. But in the early days, it was all good news.
Are you ready? I went from spending probably 4 of 7 days in bed 24 hours a day to being up and being a mom again.
And you felt good?
Felt great.
It was a common reaction among pain sufferers all over North America, and it drove OxyContin sales to unprecedented heights. In the U.S., prescriptions for the drug went from 300,000 in 1996 to 7.1 million in 2001.
There you go. Okay. Love you.
You too.
Tammy Dagnall, who lives near Hamilton, Ontario, was so impressed with her new medication, she spread the word to members of her family.
It's working for me. So, of course, I'm going to tell my mom, there's a new drug on the market, it's not as addicting as Percocet. So then she got prescribed.
So that's wonderful. I mean, it's a narcotic that's hardly addictive at all.
Yep.
That's like you've died and gone to heaven.
Absolutely.
Dr. Roman Jovi takes pride in the influence he's had on other doctors. Financial backing from the medication industry made little difference in what he thinks.
What I've written about is what I practice. I'm at the forefront. I'm at the coalface. So I'm there week in and week out treating people. And what's in that book is what I believe.
When we come back, alarm bells ringing in America.
And he said, this is going to be the worst drug that we've ever seen come into this county.
By 2001, Tammy Dagnall was turning to street dealers to satisfy what had become a serious dependency. OxyContin had been the answer to her prayers, helped her live a normal life, marriage, kids, a good job selling insurance. Her doctor told her that there was little danger of addiction. But by 2001, she was taking dangerous amounts of the narcotic. 10 times what would become the recommended maximum for daily use. She was hooked.
Your tolerance builds up really fast. It's helping your pain. But then you get immune to it. So then you go to the family doctor and he says, well, you're going to need more. So he puts you on the 40 milligram. So then you're on that for a month, and then you get used to that dose, and then he puts you on the 80. Well, this is the maximum.
When did you know that you were addicted?
Oh, for sure. I knew absolute 2001.
What was the big light bulb in 2001?
I tried to stop on my own, and the sickness was unbearable.
She didn't know it at the time, but what she was going through was a shared experience, a crisis building in a part of North America she probably had never heard of. Appalachia, as disparate as Mississippi in the south and Cape Breton in the north. An East Coast economic region defined by lumbering and coal mines, poverty and pain. It was a region that in the late 1990s hungrily embraced a new and improved cure for pain, a narcotic that was user-friendly, a drug called OxyContin.
And it all happened within a frame of 2-3 years. I mean, it just kind of blew up.
Beth Davies is a nun from the Order of Notre Dame, an addiction counselor. She's been here since the 70s. She first heard the word OxyContin from the local druggist.
And he said they're marketing it in such a way, telling us that this will be the best thing that we could ever use for pain, for patients, and it's non-addicting because it's a time-release drug, and we don't have to worry about addiction, and this is the best thing you could ever do, and we're really encouraging that.
Lee County, Virginia became a proving ground for a marketing strategy that would establish OxyContin as the leading pain control pill in America.
They got all the data on physician prescribing. They targeted the top tiers that were most liberal prescribers of opioids.
Art Van Zee was skeptical. He's a doctor, but you didn't have to be a doctor to know that narcotics are addictive. He thought Purdue's drug salesmen were deliberately playing down the fact that patients could get hooked on OxyContin.
They knew that was there before it went to market. They knew the potential was there. So it had to be a known risk and concern for them.
Appalachia was a druggist's dream. Aging population, beset by aches and pains from hard work and hard living. Many of the old-timers here had union benefits or social assistance that got them drugs for free.
It was just the best thing out there in the eyes of the doctors and a lot of the patients, and it was easily obtained. You go to the doctor and ask for one. I had a lot of people that say, you know, the doctor tried to give them OxyContin for some problem, and they'd heard the stories and they know I'm not going to take that, and still the doctor saying this is the best medication for you.
2 subjects that were living there that both had warrants on them.
Lee County Sheriff Gary Parsons.
Our real hope is that the courts will get the message. Instead of giving these folks suspended sentences and slap on the wrist, they'll actually get some time.
Sheriff Parsons grew up here, remembers a recent time when people didn't lock their doors. Now he had to deal with a drug-related crime wave.
All the crime went up. Larceny crimes went up 150, 200% in a year's time. Before that time, I could tell you pretty much everyone in Lee County that was involved in the drug trade or in drug trafficking in some way. Once the prescription thing hit, everyone from the old to the young, the rich to the poor. You had no idea who might be using the drug or distributing it.
One of the last to realize what was happening in Lee County was the addiction counselor, Sister Beth Davies. Even the pharmacist who first told her about OxyContin was panicking.
And he said, this is going to be the worst drug that we've ever seen come into this county. And it's going to cause us more problems than any drug we've ever seen before.
The pills were flooding through the hands of those who really needed them, ending up with people who just wanted to get high. And they were saying it was just as good as heroin. Sister Beth Davies.
I've never seen anything. It was like somebody lit a fire in a dry pasture, dry forest, and it just went, right through.
By 2002, Lee County was up in arms, demanding that Purdue get OxyContin off the market. Company officials finally reacted.
They met with us, and at that time they were doing damage control. I think they were well aware that there was a problem with their drug and it was becoming addictive.
But they weren't admitting that to you guys.
No, they were telling us studies, and they had a front man that was up and doing presentations and telling us, that their drug wasn't the problem.
But their drug was the problem, and American Purdue officials would admit years later that as early as 1995, they had known that many of their claims about OxyContin, including its addictive nature, were fraudulent. In 2002, they offered Lee County $100,000 to help fix the problem they insisted that they didn't cause. Sister Beth Davies couldn't believe her ears.
I was furious.
Why were you furious? Why do you get furious if somebody's trying to give you a bag of money to...
Bag of money for blood money, so that they would be able to go around and tell other people in other communities, look what we have done for Lee County.
By 2002, the story of Lee County was becoming tragically familiar all along the ridge called Appalachia. South Carolina, rural Maine, Atlantic Canada. Doctors beset on one hand by people desperate for some relief from pain, and drug salesmen offering narcotic medication that would do the trick with hardly any risk. We're now witnessing the beginning of another painful epidemic, drug addiction.
She's still using about 4 to 5.
And no increase in that?
No increase in that. And
pain specialist Dr. Phil Berger of St. Michael's Hospital in Toronto.
She breaks it. She breaks it. It was a so-called perfect storm, a confluence of unbelievably aggressive marketing by the pharmaceutical industries which sell these drugs, the inadequacy of education to medical students and physicians in training, and the utter failure of regulatory bodies, the colleges of physicians and surgeons, to rein in their membership and provide proper oversight to how their members were prescribed medications. All three together produced this burst of widespread availability of very strong opioid or narcotic medications.
I just had a undeniable spark in my eye. I personally think that I was beautiful in this picture. Not a care in the world.
Tammy Dagnall didn't think twice when her doctor offered OxyContin for chronic back pain that started with a car accident. It worked. She passed the word on to others in her family. But it wasn't long before she realized she had a problem worse than pain.
What was it that made you want to stop?
I felt that it was interfering with work, marriage, and my kids.
How?
Mood swings. You would nod off because you were taking so much.
How much?
Well, at that time, you don't know what... I could take up to 30 80s a day.
30 80s?
Yes.
And still...
I was a functioning professional until 2007 when my world came crashing down. I wrote an exam, an insurance broker's exam. That day I had cut it down. I was only on 1780s. And I passed it with flying colors.
We're talking about more than 1,000 milligrams of OxyContin.
Absolutely.
And you wrote an exam.
Yep.
And passed.
And passed.
And felt great.
Yep. He's been there through thick and thin.
But the great feeling wouldn't last long. The drug that was a godsend 15 years ago is now a demon she's unable to escape.
I would do anything to get that back, that I never ever took that pill.
We got courtroom 2 as well.
When we come back, Judgment Day for OxyContin.
The Purdue company is now convicted felon. Every time someone hears the word OxyContin, they're going to have in their mind, oh, that was a drug that company was convicted of.
This was the downside of the hoopla over OxyContin. The much publicized narcotic payload was too tempting to be left alone by drug abusers.
Here we go. I'm going to water on it.
There were widespread reports that addicts had learned to crack narcotic pills like OxyContin to get the full effect in minutes instead of over hours.
All I can explain it in one word: bliss.
On Vancouver's downtown east side, addicts were onto it by 1998.
It's already starting to hit me.
This is now the unintended legacy of narcotic pain pills.
80?
Yep. The Urban Methadone Clinic, where addicts try to stabilize their sickness. This is London, Ontario, where a dozen years ago hardly anybody needed methadone. Now 1,000 people come here every day, like Kim Westlake. Most of them were hooked on OxyContin.
They've all tried other ways to stop, so they come to methadone treatment because they realize the drugs are killing them and they can't get off them any other way. Tanya.
Dr. John Craven is a psychiatrist who runs this clinic full-time. Downstairs, he dispenses methadone.
I'm doing all right.
Upstairs, he dispenses hope.
How are you doing?
Better now.
Hope to people like Kim Westlake.
She was started on these medications for the first time by a doctor. She was provided it as treatment for a painful health condition.
Kim Westlake was taking it for pain, but soon discovered that she couldn't do without it.
There you go.
And that it was taking more and more to make her feel just normal. You weren't grinding it up and snorting it.
No, not.
You weren't
No.
shooting it up your arm.
No.
You were taking it the way they told you to take it.
Yep. Yep.
So you figured nothing bad can happen.
That's what I thought. Okay, let me see. Let me see. Perfect.
Did you know how addicted you were?
My life was built around this pill. I had to make sure that if I was going on a business trip, if I was going on a holiday, if I was doing anything, I had to make sure that I had enough to keep me going, and then a few days more worth, just in case, before I went.
It was no longer about the pain in your bones. It was about a terror that you were going to be caught without it.
Yep.
Because of what would happen.
Because of what would happen, the sickness.
Dr. Roman Jovi runs a network of pain clinics in Ontario. He's been an advocate for OxyContin since it first appeared and is philosophical about its downside.
They try that. Because in their view, rightly or wrongly, they perceive it as somehow safer. Somehow safer because it comes out of
rightly or wrongly because they've been told that.
Well, rightly or wrongly because their parents have been taking it and they say nothing's happened to them, so I guess
and their
it's
parents
okay
are taking it because they've been told by doctors and they've been told by a large company that the risk of taking this stuff is minimal and the potential benefits are unlimited.
Well, unlimited is a bit strong.
Well, it is, especially people who are suffering pain. You throw out some hope and it suddenly becomes magnified in their minds.
But people who are hurting are desperate because of the lack of anything else to offer them. So, I mean, I wish we could develop a treatment on the pharmacologic side that didn't have the addictive properties but was also very potent analgesic. Unfortunately, we can't separate those out just yet. We're working on it.
But for his patients like Marty Whitaker, potential benefits are good enough, regardless of the risks.
Nice to see you. Have a seat.
Thanks.
How have you been?
I'm still fighting this high pain phase. I'm averaging around 8.5 spikes to 9.
12 years ago, Marty had a fairly normal life, married with 2 kids. Then a water skiing accident changed everything.
All right, so just, I'll see you in 8 weeks as usual.
Already.
A shattered spine, excruciating pain. She discovered Dr. Jovi and OxyContin and has been on the medication ever since.
I'm as dependent on OxyContin as I am on my glasses to see. I'm habituated to the medication. I'm not addicted. While ever pain exists in a body, addiction, physical addiction, is impossible. I've been taught.
For Marty Whitaker, dependency is just the price she pays for her mobility. It's not the same as addiction, a delicate distinction that she entrusts to her pain specialist.
Okay, bye-bye.
Bye-bye.
Dr. Roman Jovi.
I have a sixth sense about people. I try to, through interviewing them, get some sense of their character and get some sense about, well, is this 9 out of 10, sort of 9 out of 10, or is there emotional pain behind it, and does that need attention? So that's the challenge of assessing patients.
But doctors in a busy general practice would have little time or training for assessing the complex ailments of a patient like Kim Westlake. Many had little choice but to rely on the reassurance of a salesman that OxyContin was the most effective and the safest pill available. The doctor that was handing this stuff out, how do we explain his willingness to give you lethal amounts of this drug?
As much as I'd like to blame him, honestly, I believe he just hated to see people suffer. I think he was also a bit of a coward in that he was afraid of my reaction if he said no.
By 2001, in Lee County, Virginia, people were complaining loudly that the salesman had been grossly understating the dangers of addiction and exaggerating the benefits of opiates. That year alone, Purdue US spent $200 million to market and promote just OxyContin. Sales of OxyContin soared. By the middle of the decade, the drug was earning Purdue Pharma over $1 billion a year. Dr. Art Van Zee.
This is like a Yellowstone fire where there are a bunch of people on the north side with squirt guns trying to put the fire out, and in the backside they're dropping napalm on the backside of the fire.
In 2002, he went to Washington and complained to a congressional committee about the hard sell tactics, about salesmen getting rich on bonuses, overstating claims for benefits, and understating risks.
I mean, you could take a second-year medical student and have him read those, and he could realize that they didn't have anything to do with what the real risk of iatrogenic addiction was for using opioids for chronic non-cancer pain. It was not factual.
It hardly mattered. The critics were being drowned out by a massive lobbying campaign. It would be 2007 before the accumulated outrage in places like Lee County finally struck home. Federal prosecutors in Virginia laid criminal charges, accusing Purdue and 3 top officers of lying in their marketing. The trial in Abingdon, Virginia attracted national attention.
We got courtroom 2 as well for overflow.
But few people were more gratified than the addiction counselor, Sister Beth Davies.
Many of those who had lost children had lost family members, were able to go before the judge and tell their story in front of the officials from Purdue.
My grandson at 6 years old came home and found her dead in her bed. And I will never forgive Howard Udell, Michael Friedman, or Paul Goldenheim for that. They are murderers.
In the end, the company was fined $600 million, while 3 top company officials would be told to pay $35 million for what the judge called a campaign of deliberate deception.
The Purdue company is now convicted felon. Every time someone hears the word OxyContin, they're going to have in their mind, oh, that was a drug that that company was convicted of.
The Abingdon criminal convictions were a moral victory for the activists who had watched the addiction tragedy unfold for most of 10 years. They were a setback for the company executives who had stonewalled them for much of that time. But by 2007, those fraudulent claims and marketing strategies so scathingly denounced in court had firmly established narcotics as a key part of a vast pain management industry. If 2007 was a bad year for Purdue, it was a disaster for Tammy Dagnall, who had staked her life on Purdue's assurance that OxyContin was low risk for addiction. By then, she just couldn't get enough of it. She had a good job as an insurance broker, but was spending all her income on the drug, blew her retirement savings, then her husband's savings, then became a thief.
2007 was the peak of my addiction. I stole from my company that I was working for because I had exhausted everything else.
You stole? Take me through it.
I had to tell my husband I lost my job. I have a police officer that's standing in the front door, and he says to me, he says, if you don't tell him, I'm going to tell him. I'll give you 3 days to tell him. Police officer left, I took him out back, and I told him what I did. And it shocked the hell out of him.
When we come back, the price we pay for the pain of opiate addiction. You're not a believer anymore.
I'm not a believer anymore.
In 2007, there was a feeling of vindication in Appalachia when a court fined Purdue more than $600 million for deception. The judge declared he'd have sent Purdue executives to jail if he'd had the option. In London, Ontario, Dr. Henry Chapesky had been prescribing opiates for years. After the Virginia decision, he noticed Canadian drug salesmen now trying to control the fallout.
The pharmaceutical representatives were adamant that Purdue USA has nothing to do with Purdue Canada. So anything that happened down there, that's just, Americans are very litigious. It's probably just a frivolous lawsuit, and so it has nothing to do with Purdue Canada.
But Purdue Canada was selling OxyContin with astonishing success, and there were striking similarities to the American approach. The focus on doctors and pain research. In 2006, Purdue donated $200,000 to a new pain clinic, which is associated with the med school here at Western University in London. They recruited doctors who instructed trainee doctors on the benefits of opiates like OxyContin. Among those advocates, Dr. Roman Jovi. He was prominent on the Purdue speaking circuit. He prepared a major teaching manual for doctors and med students learning about pain. It was paid for by Purdue. How badly was your faith in Purdue shaken when they were charged criminally in the States and then convicted and fined a significant amount?
Not much at all, quite frankly, because that was in America. It was now 10 years ago, I think,
No, 2007.
But based on stuff that happened 10 years ago. It's a different regulatory environment, different laws, different ways of operating. And so I just, and I can always remember going to American Pain meetings and thinking, wow, things are really kind of off the wall, big. And I didn't see that sort of thing going on here in Canada.
Well, Purdue was having its workshops here, having its educational seminars here. How were they different?
Oh, different, more conservative, far more conservative.
Whatever the differences in corporate style and legal structure, the marketing of OxyContin had phenomenal results in both countries. Total OxyContin sales in 2010 were $3.5 billion. Canadian OxyContin sales in 1998 were a modest $3 million. A little over 10 years later, sales in Canada had rocketed to more than $240 million. Dr. Philip Berger.
They target doctors with continuing medical education events at upscale restaurants, personal meetings for those doctors who agree to meet drug company representatives, so-called literature, articles from the medical literature, all of it to promote and encourage doctors to prescribe their medications.
They're being spoon-fed.
They're being spoon-fed, and they're being given dinners, and they're being given free materials. They're given the same textbook that the medical students were given.
Recently, the University of Toronto dropped Dr. Jovi's textbook on pain management from its medical school curriculum after complaints that it was biased toward the use of opioids.
The University of Toronto has pulled your book.
They have.
I think that you've been more or less instructed to back away from what was perceived in there as a company line. What does that say about what you've been doing over the last 10 years?
It says that the University of Toronto basically didn't have the courage to stand up to some outside bullies. Because
they were doctors. The outside voices were doctors.
But not involved in pain management, not knowing anything about pain management, frankly. And that book was reviewed internally by someone on the faculty who said, you know what, it's a good book. Too bad that Purdue's name is on it.
One of the bullies was Dr. Philip Berger, a pain specialist at Toronto's St. Mike's Hospital.
Any fever or anything like that?
There may well be parts of the book that are useful. There are also parts of the book that promote incorrect information on which doctors rely, de-emphasizing, diminishing the addictive potential of long-acting opioids.
Critics of Dr. Jovi's handbook singled out this claim that OxyContin is less powerful than morphine, when in fact it can be twice as strong. They also criticize what could be interpreted as encouragement for overuse of OxyContin.
So, Sam, you feeling well otherwise?
Yes.
And
for Dr. Henry Chapesky, who runs a busy practice in London, Ontario, stark evidence of the harm that opiates can cause persuaded him to stop prescribing them. He now makes it clear that anyone who wants narcotic medication should go somewhere else.
You're not a believer anymore.
I'm not a believer anymore. After learning about what happened with OxyContin in the States with the judgment in Virginia against Purdue, that's when I started to realize I have to change my practice for my patients.
There's evidence of a new caution in the med schools and the doctor's offices, but there has clearly been a revolutionary change in how we use narcotics to manage pain. After 17 years, OxyContin has been replaced by what Purdue promises will be a safer substitute. But there are already powerful new narcotic drugs in the pipeline from other companies, drugs potentially as easy to abuse as OxyContin.
Kim.
London, Ontario addiction counselor, Dr. John Craven.
Hello. I think a huge cat has been let out of the bag.
How are you doing today?
Pretty good.
And I don't think it's going to be put back in. And I think there's a lot of interest, including people with chronic pain who don't feel it should be put back in.
How fair is it to accuse you, Purdue, the whole educational process of having deliberately overstated the potential of the drugs and understated the risks inherent in taking these drugs?
It depends on your perspective. So if you're somebody working in an addiction treatment program and all you see are people coming in addicted to opiates, you'll say, oh my God, these are awful. All they do is addict people.
Are you accepting some responsibility as a member of the medical profession?
Well, certainly the medical profession bears some responsibility, but I would put to you, how far should we as a society go to protect you from poor decisions and poor behavior? But where does the responsibility end up there?
Poor decisions, poor behavior, criminal marketing behavior by American drug manufacturers. In the end, it all comes down to this: collateral damage. In Ontario alone this year, 36,000 people getting by on methadone at a cost to taxpayers of $200 million. A 600% increase since OxyContin hit the drugstores and the streets. For Kim Westlake, it's a struggle that has already ended for half a dozen of her friends, people who have died from a narcotic overdose or suicide. Do you ever think you might have to live like this forever? Or
yeah. It'll be a struggle every day. Every day.
At least Kim Westlake has kicked the OxyContin habit. Tammy Dagnall is still stuck with the drug she started 15 years ago. Every day a choice between the drug dependency she hates and the chronic pain she cannot stand.
There's no 30, 40-day program that's going to fix me. I'm going to need to go for a long time. And then I'm going to have to find something that is going to be able to help me with my pain, because the same thing keeps happening. I come out, I last 3 months, and I go back on it because I can't handle the pain. My husband and my son are peeling me out of bed. So I go to the doctor, I can't handle it. Back on it I go.